Join us for part two of our deep dive with David Givens of Zephyr as we explore side two of the Going Back to Colorado album. There were great expectations for how this album was going to explode Zephyr to the top of the American music scene when it was released in 1971. But you know what? It didn't. So let's go into the deep dive as to what the hell happened. Here's the story about side two.
What's next?
Show Busy.
Show Busy. That was one that we recorded after Hendrix died. And we had been, originally we were in Studio A. Studio A is a big room. It's the one, if you people have seen photographs, it's got colored lights and a lot of infrastructure to do separation. It was a pretty big room. There were no squares. I don't think there's any square walls in there other than the one where that goes into the control room. There were curved surfaces and, all on purpose to get that big sound. Anyway, when Jimmy died, suddenly Eddie and Mitch Mitchell were tasked with trying to make a finished album out of a semi-finished album to be Cry of Love. And it was a big ask for those two guys because they were grieving for their friend, and they had to get this thing out. There was this deadline, and the management company, Mike Jeffries and Reprise, and everybody was just putting the screws on them because they were afraid that if they let it go too long, I'm surmising here, if they let it go too long, Hendrix would fade from people's consciousness, which is nonsense, but I think that's how they thought.
Well, there's money involved.
Yeah, there was a big investment, and Jimmy Hendrix, the goose that laid the golden egg had just been cooked, and that was just
tragedy. The first, one of the first is just the overwhelming tragedies, which of course there's other names on that list, but
well, yeah, I mean, Janis died on my birthday. Right before that, and then
Jim Morrison.
And I don't remember when Morrison died in that same period, didn't he?
Yep.
I think the CIA did a hell of a job on those three.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I know. You talk about conspiracy theories. I've got one for that. Anyway,
Show Busy.
Tommy had written that. Candy had participated in the lyric and the arrangement and the melody of that song. We were in Studio B, which was like really small and really low ceilings and covered with carpet, and it was kind of dead and really small. The control room was bigger than the recording room. They were using it for doing advertising jingles, stuff that was like voiceovers and that kind of stuff. It was never set up to be a whole band playing in there, but we did it. Kim King became our engineer instead of Eddie Kramer, and I became the producer, and so I was the one who produced that song, and it's kind of a cool thing, I think it sounds pretty good, and it rocks pretty good. And
Bobby's drum intro is like,
I think his drumming's killer on that.
Yep.
And Tommy's stuff is really pretty killer on it too. And I always kind of liked that song, and that was my first opportunity to really actually produce a cut, a side. I got to sit in there with Kim and tell him what to do, and sort of just orchestrate the thing, which was really, really cool.
So you were the thumbs up guy?
I was the thumbs up and thumbs down guy. That ain't gonna work, you guys. But yeah, and I had to play too, obviously. So it was. But that was a cool thing, and I think that was the closest to like a real pop song that we had on there. But I don't particularly care for the lyrics. It's just like Show Busy's my life, and I don't like songs about being in bands too much.
Was that Candy's lyric?
It was Tommy's idea and Candy filling in the pieces that were missing, whatever it was. Once again, that whole thing is, it just it came out pretty organically, and we were kind of struggling with the thing because suddenly we got, first of all, kicked to the curb. If it had been me when I was in the automotive industry and working in the corporate world, had something like that happened, I would immediately have said, okay, everything goes on hold right now. We do not take second banana position, and Eddie Kramer didn't think of it because he was so shocked, I think. And he was shocked.
Well, there's nothing that could have been more important than Jimmy.
No, that was it.
And that was batten down the hatches.
Oh no, it was a disaster on so many different levels. I understand that, but had our management been worth a shit, or had Warner Brothers been worth a shit, or if Eddie Kramer had been a grown man, somebody would have said, no, he was 20 something. At that point, you're just going with. He's just going on emotion and
grief,
pressure. Yeah. Hendrix's girlfriend was in there every day drinking and being an asshole in the control room. It was just a mess. Anyway, so here we were, we'd been demoted. And so the pressure for us was, well, you got to finish that up. You got to get that record done. You got to get out. So it was the proper thing to do would have been to send us home, say, okay, we'll come back after everything gets sorted out. That's what should have happened, but it's not what happened. What happened instead was we pushed ourselves to try and finish it. So we did some good things, but the mixing was never as good as it should have been. And there should have been some serious look at some of those lyrics and some of the melodies. Some of that stuff was not cool.
Was there an A&R rep?
No, hell no.
So Eddie was all things to all people.
Eddie was the engineer, the producer, the A&R guy. I mean, we were all A&R guys. We were all, contributing that. And I don't,
again, it gets back to the first album, and just where is the partner who's really knows about plugging into where, okay, the radio's going to light, whatever that dynamic is.
Yep.
And you didn't really have that for this album.
Eddie wasn't really, Eddie presented himself to us as a producer, just like Halverson did. And at that time, he was an engineer, not a producer. This was him trying to break through. He was doing the same thing with Carly, but like Carly's record, she was in there with this guy who was her writing partner, this little short guy, kind of a dick too. And they wrote together, and he had a lot more influence on the production than Eddie did. Eddie was basically making sure that the sound sounded right and all that stuff, but he was being the engineer with her. But he got credit for being a producer. And it's a ladder that you climb one rung at a time. So that's what he was doing. I'm not picking on him for that. He did get me that gig, playing on Carly's record, which was always good. And I walked in there and I wrote my bass part for her first hit single, and that was a really good experience for me. But that little guy, the reason I said he was kind of a dick was he wanted real New York studio musicians. He didn't want me and Bobby, you know. As it turned out, my bass parts were okay, but he got rid of Bobby's drums. That wasn't the feel that he wanted. And so I made out, Bobby didn't. But when we got fired, and this was right before Hendrix died. I mean, it was like the week before Hendrix died. I walked into the studio for our session, and Eddie handed me a $10 bill. He said, "Here, this is from Carly. You guys, you're off the gig, but Carly wanted you to have this." So she gave me $10 and said, "Thanks,"
Which in today's money is $100.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. We could eat dinner for that, Yeah. But I actually, and I liked working with her. She was really nice. She was a real, earthy kind of girl, yeah.
She was like
She was
a
cool.
New York Candy, but from a better family.
Yeah,
Not that there's anything wrong with Candy's family, but
no. I know what you mean. No, Simon and Schuster. That's a good thing. Carly was like, she was a woman who knew what she wanted, and she was willing to do whatever. But she was also a happy kind of having fun kind of girl, She and I had a couple of nice exchanges, she was all right. She was good. And she sent me an album when it came out, which was
not just $10, but
well, no, she sent me the actual $3.98 album. She had to pay postage too,
But she didn't have to. She got a box for free.
I know, but the thing is, she
cared enough to, yeah.
And I think she probably sent one to all the different guys who played on it.
Yeah,
that would be my guess.
Thoughtful is what that's
which
called.
was, I think, kind. And she sent a little note, "Thank you, David," and blah blah blah.
Did you keep the note?
I don't know. I think I've got the album around here, and if the album's here, the note's probably inside it. I don't know.
Okay, you need to go dig that up, David.
Well, I'll try and find it. See, the problem is when Candy died, we had split up our record collection when we got separated, divorced, and we still switched. We were still sort of integrated, and so we were still swapping records out. Well, when she died, her boyfriend took all of her stuff and threw it in a truck and drove away, never to be seen again. So all of our stuff that Candy and I had that was still our stuff disappeared.
The twists and turns of life.
Man, when she died, there was a big piece of me that went with her, and really in a practical way, memories, we shared the responsibility to, okay. And I don't know why she remembered some things and I remembered others, but that's how it was. So when she was gone, all the stuff that she remembered went with her, so there was still to this day, I have a hard time remembering certain kinds of things because that was her part, but that's, that's, like you said, c'est la vie, baby,
So after Show Busy, Keep Me, which we touched on, but
Keep Me. I always loved that song. I thought it was really beautiful. Ann and I actually worked out a version of that song. Really a beautiful song. John Tizar lyrics, I think.
Yep.
Tommy music.
Yep.
And that was one where Candy went out and directed the backup singers, and she sang with them, and they loved her. They were like, "Wow, look at this little white girl. She can actually sing," and they had a good time. They were kind of, they came up with something that was really beautiful. I don't think it's as outstanding in the mix as it should be because it was so beautiful. And the tone of their voices and stuff was just wonderful. But I like the sentiment, and I like how, once again, I think it's a little too fast. I would take it at a different tempo, and I would use an acoustic guitar and probably no drums and bass. I don't think that stuff was actually necessary until maybe later in the tune. Anyway, that was, recording that one was a lot of fun because of the backup singers and and the quality of the writing. I think that's really one of the better songs that we ever did.
Yeah, John. This is before Jeff really got engaged as a lyricist with Tommy. And of course, he did amazing stuff. But this is when the T-Sar was really Tommy and he were really. It was like Elton John and Bernie Taupin in
Oh
many
yeah, yeah,
regards.
yeah, yeah.
Because a lot of the songs he wrote the lyrics for, you can really tell that Tommy would have owned those lyrics. And I don't know if he had an idea that John then riffed on or how that all came together. But those songs all feel like what John came up with, that Tommy was in sync with it. That's my
Oh yeah,
sense.
they were neighbors. They lived on the same floor of the apartment building where we all lived. Candy and I lived directly below Tommy and Karen, and then John, I think, was either next door or two doors down on Tommy's floor.
Marine Street,
Yep, 949
the
Marine.
building's still there.
Yep, yep. Old man McPhee was the landlord. We had fun in that place, man. Wyndham Hanaway lived with me and Candy for a while, and
Because
he
that
was
was that was a big upgrade from living on 429 or 7 Canyon.
427, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean,
major
yeah.
upgrade.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah. That we were making it then, man. We were like, um, I got a Martin. No, I hadn't got the Martin yet. I got a Gibson acoustic guitar, which I had never had anything really nice like that. We had a piano. We had a little spin-it piano in our living room. We had a tape recorder, this big juicy Sony 2-track tape recorder, and we were happening. Had a good stereo, man. It was tremendous.
On this road of misery, I'm not sure what I'll find. It's so late in the night, and I need some peace of mind. Help me find a place to make my bed. Help me find a place to lay my head.
Then the next song, John Ferris, "Take
Oh
My
yeah,
Love."
Take My
Take My
Love.
Love.
God, the thing that stands out about that song is John, wrote the whole thing. This was John had a vision of himself having a solo album, and this was his entree. And he didn't like what the rhythm track sounded like. He was teaching us the song in the studio, and he was like, no, that's not it. That's not it. And Bobby and I were like, well, can you explain what you want? John's explanation was, can you make it blacker? And we'd play something that we thought was funky, and he'd go, no, blacker. So finally, I came up with this bass line that now when I listen to it, I think, well, it's like a reggae bass line. It kind of starts on a upbeat and, falls down into the same spot. And Bobby was like, okay, I can handle that, so we started playing that. And that's how that song came to be, and I think John, Candy sang it live. When we did it live, she sang it, and it was a lot better than when John sang it, I think. I mean, there's a lot of people like John singing it. I don't, but that c'est la vie, Dave. It's a nice song. I think it's a really pretty song, and I love the bass line, and I love the guitar part on it. The guitar solo is killer.
And so, how did that just politically come about? That everybody would sign off on John having a song.
Oh, there was no question about it. It was,
But he must have been bringing it up. Hey, I want to do a song, or I have a song.
Oh yeah, but I mean, there was no dispute. He was like, I got a song I want to do, and we were like, okay, let's hear it. It's not like we had an overabundance of songs. We were we were spending most of our time playing on, our focus was playing out on the road, going to shows, playing in all these places. We were traveling a lot at that time, or had been leading up to that. And that was where we were. So, writing the songs and getting ready for this record was sort of a, something we did at home in our spare time, and we liked the song. Originally, Candy was going to sing it, and she wasn't getting John's nuance. And so, he had been singing it for her. And so Eddie, I think, was the one. He said, well, John, just go ahead and sing it. You're doing fine, And he kind of sounds a little like Leon Russell or Mac Rebenak or one of those kind of things,
Or Tom Waits, kind of a bohemian.
Yeah.
It's
Which is that was Johnny Catt's thing. He was a Cincinnati bohemian. I think that's really true.
You belong to me. You belong to me. You belong to me. You belong to me. You belong to me, to me.
He must have been a really sweet guy, though. He always had a nice woman, My relationship with John had more to do with the fact that we were both van drivers. And we used to, car talk with each other more than we did anything else. Although every now and then we would sit down and play together. I remember one time we had played a gig, and it had not been a particularly great gig. And John and I were back in the motel room, and I was playing a bass unamplified, and he was playing flute. And we got into this thing it was like a relief. And John said, that's the best music we played all night. And I was like, yeah, man. Yep. Because we just hadn't connected, and then John and I did connect. And so we had that, I always liked playing with John. After the band broke up, we played with John and Robbie with no guitar player. And then we tried a couple of different guitar players, and it just kept falling apart. And so we just blew it up. But after the Sunset Ride record came out, we got Robbie and John back in the band. And so Danny Smith, the piano player on Sunset Ride, and John played organ most of the time, and Robbie played drums. And that band was really good. I mean, the abortive tour that we took, that was just a nightmare. It was just a nightmare. But we played really well, and the shows that we did were pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. That was a really good band. And Jock Bartley was a good guitar player, but he wasn't a guitar hero. He was in the band, and that was what we really were happy to have at that time. Anyway, getting back to the record, Take My Love. What came after that?
I'll Be Right Here.
I'll Be Right Here.
Again, the Tommy demo. I don't know. We've got the video of that on the archives YouTube.
I'd like to. I should listen. I've never heard that, and I'd really like to hear.
It's powerful.
Yeah, I believe it.
Really,
those words are really good. I really wish we would have recorded it like that. But Tommy wanted to do dun 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 dun. It's like well, whatever. Okay.
I'll send you the link as soon as we're done. But
yeah, good.
So anyway, obviously got presented. You guys are going to do that song. It was a great song.
Yeah.
And
that was Tommy produced that. That was how he wanted it, and that's how we did it, and that was that.
Any other song would you say on this record that he produced, or was that maybe his first foray?
That may have been his first one, and that's the only one that he really did. I'm trying to think. mean, he always had input. We all did. We were a repertory company in a lot of ways.
You were a band.
Yeah, we were a
What
band.
what that's supposed to mean,
That's what it's supposed to mean. Everybody's even. It's a family,
Yep.
We're all brothers and sisters here, and that's how it was.
On retrospect and going back and listening to that song, you made a few comments about it, but just maybe another comment or two about "I'll Be Right Here."
Well, I think the words are really poignant. That's why I think hearing Tommy do it as a single playing an acoustic guitar, I think that is, looking back on it, that's what I wish we had recorded it that way. In fact, Tommy could have sung it. Candy never liked singing that song. It was, she didn't want to be a farm girl or a mountain girl or any of that stuff. She wanted to be a cosmopolitan. I mean, she was a brilliant, smart woman. She didn't want to be, classified as some kind of hard mountain strain. That really ticked her off. Somebody wrote that about her in New York, and they meant it as a compliment. Oh, you can really see that hard mountain strain in Candy Givens. And she was like,
fuck that.
What an asshole. That was her comment. It was like, what is that asshole? Why is he saying that? I'm not like that. I mean, she knew art and she knew literature, and
where was she from?
She was she was born in Iowa, in Des Moines, lived very briefly in Ottumwa, Iowa, where her grandparents were pig farmers. And then the mom and dad picked up, and took their two little daughters, Candy and her younger daughter, Letitia, and they moved to Denver. And things did not go well when they first got there. They were struggling. It was hard for Dick to find work. That was her dad. And they ended up moving to Evergreen when she was about, I want to say, 4 or 5, and they moved into a log cabin up on a bluff above the lake. Looking
Before
out.
Evergreen became what Evergreen now is.
Well, it was so far away in those days. Without I-70, Evergreen was a pretty good hike. It wasn't something you just you wouldn't commute from Evergreen.
And now, of course, people do, but
yeah, but not then. And it was a really small town, and it was beautiful. And she always had a warm spot for growing up in Evergreen. She used to take swimming lessons in Idaho Springs when she was just a little skinny kid,
Indian Springs.
Her mom and dad or dad would drive her over to the pool there, and she took swimming lessons.
Indian Springs Hot Springs Resort.
Yep, there you go.
In Idaho Springs, Colorado.
Yep. As she put it, she said, I was just a little bone rack back then. And she said it was just cold, cold for a little skinny girl. But that was her world. She grew up in those woods. She grew up climbing the hills and climbing the trees and skating on the lake in the wintertime. And it was a pretty idyllic upbringing. And then they moved down to Applewood Grove when she was in the 7th grade, I think. And she started going to Golden High School, I think, right after that. I don't know which junior high she went to. Wheat Ridge, maybe? Something like that. Anyway, yeah. So she had an aversion to being a hillbilly. She was like, I'm not a hillbilly. I may be a lot of things, but I'm not that. And
and that song, the demo version, it's almost like a Woody Guthrie-esque kind of bleakness.
And I think that's appropriate for what those words say.
Yep.
I think that that song. Well, that's another one that Ann and I worked up a version of, because at one point we were going to put together some kind of a Zephyr something. And so we worked up a new version of Across the River, Keep Me, I'll Be Right Here, and some of the other ones, but they were all done Americana style. you know. There were some of those songs are really pretty, and they just need to be done better. And a better production would have helped.
Crops this year have been uncommonly poor, and next year the fields will surely be idle. North of this place they let the red dust pour through their palms, and they shake their heads. But I'll be right here until they want me to cry. I'll be right here until they want me to lay down and die. They fear nothing will ever grow here again. The land has been blighted by someone's sin. The young children cry 'cause they're underfed, and the old men are already talking out of their heads. But I'll be right here until they want me to cry. I'll be right here until they want me to lay down and die. There's been plenty bad luck for us to bear. When one feels just like staring at the wall, with everyone so down, the fever will start around, and we will have to start breaking the ground. Until they want me to cry, I'll be right here till they want me to lay down and die. With things so poor, the grass and prairie so dry, we'll keep an eye for a fire and a prayer in the sky. We gotta be watching as we do what we can. Try to remember the dust and come out again. And I'll be right here until they want me to cry. And I'll be right here till they want me to lay down and die.
Well, I'm appreciating this right here. We're about to go to the last song, but I don't think this has ever been done before. There's some kind of deep dive into every song on this album. At least I haven't. I'm not aware of it. And so anyway, last song at this very moment.
Yeah. Now Candy wrote this one. Oh, at home, we were living on the corner of 8th and University in Boulder, in a little house on the corner there. We had a piano in the house, and she played piano a lot in the house. We both did, but she actually knew how to play. And so she had written that instrumental theme. And then she had this idea of, at this very moment in time, all these things are going on at the same time. And she and I, worked on the lyrics. She wrote most of it. Some of it I wrote. There's sort of these sort of wordplay kind of things in it.
At this very moment on this cool afternoon, someone's crossing a bridge, someone's crossing his heart, and someone is crossing someone. Someone's being born, someone's being reborn, yeah, being reborn. Someone only sees himself, while others see the world, while still others see the infinite expanding universe.
I think really a cool song. I mean, I think it's really good. I think the stuff that Tommy plays, the stuff that John plays, it's all pretty amazing stuff. Candy played the piano on it, and sang. And that's I think that kind of wraps it up, I guess. That's what I think. I mean, it was a kind of a pioneering kind of song. I mean, that was that particular kind of I don't know of any other songs that are that particular style like that, except for some of the other stuff she wrote.
It's almost a little operatic.
It is kind of, yeah.
In terms of
She was if you watch her on stage, she was an actress on stage, and I think that PBS clip illustrates that really well, and I think you probably saw the same things I did, where there were people who say, well, man, she was really messed up. I think she must have been on drugs. And no, man, she's singing a song about going down to the St. James Infirmary and seeing her dead lover. She was so what, she's supposed to smile through that? I mean, there are people who would.
Well, I don't even get that. Never would have crossed my mind. But again, projections are a dime a dozen.
Yeah, true enough. I just don't appreciate it when people say that.
You're from Detroit.
Yes, I am. I'm from Detroit.
Motherfucker.
We don't take that shit where I come from, man.
So I just remember being in Boulder working at the record center, and that you guys going to do this album and then having it come out. It was like fucking a big deal. Huh. And all those who loved the band were like, couldn't wait for it to come out.
Yeah.
Like as important as anything could possibly be, to be honest.
That's interesting. I've never thought about that or had any exposure to that.
Yep. And then it came out, and the worst graphics in the history of an album being released.
No
beyond
kidding.
any comprehension.
Yeah.
Just ridiculous. And then the pictures on the back were like,
oh.
And so what happened? What the hell happened? Because
Well,
here it is.
Jimi Hendrix died.
Yep.
That's what happened. There was, Barry Fay was our manager and had no clue. Bruce Gladman was the guy who was supposed to be doing our day-to-day operation. Well, his company was called Shady Management for a reason. And the main reason was that he was an incompetent con man in the position. There was no way that he was going to find somebody who was going to do good artwork. There was no way that he was going to find somebody who... Wyndham took those photographs. He showed up one morning shortly after Hendrix had died. We didn't even know we were getting our pictures taken. He walked in with his Nikon and said, the record company wants pictures of you guys. Click, 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 click. and that was it. We had no input. We had no input on the album. We had an input on the album cover. The idea for the album cover was that it was supposed to be on the street in New York with these tall buildings around, and there was supposed to be water on the street, and reflected in the water was supposed to be the mountains of Colorado. That was supposed to be the Going Back to Colorado cover.
The
So
execution.
you saw what they did.
Yeah, that's not quite what happened.
No, it's not really what happened. You know, they've got an aerial, a blurry aerial photograph of some part of New York that no one knows what it is. You know, and then there's that ugly little square in the middle with God knows a cartoon of the mountains. I assume, I don't know. And then you look on the back and you see that murderer's row. I mean, none of us look good. Not one of us looks good, you know.
And we wouldn't
Nobody
want to have
gave
a
a
photo of the band as a band,
We could have.
but no, you know.
Well, when we re-released it, we put a couple of Dan Fong group pictures on it that he took up in the mountains. And actually, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but the artwork that we did in 2015 or 16 when we re-released it, it's a pretty nice looking package. You know?
Yeah, but we're talking. This is coming out in early 71.
Yep.
And again, for those of us who were in the fan category,
Oh, I bet it was a big disappointment.
in
It was for
Boulder,
us. Yeah.
which, you know, not hundreds of thousands of people, but, you know, we're talking about an emotional attachment that
Yeah.
I had and lots of other people in Boulder had. And I
Oh,
worked at the hip record store. And
I
it's just
know.
like, here it is, here it is. And it's like, and so what happened from a promotional front when it came out?
Nothing. 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 The only thing I saw was, I remember, and I'm pretty sure this was about the same time. Billboard magazine had an article about prospects for success in the music business, and there were they picked two people, and Eric Clapton as a solo artist was one, and Zephyr was the other. You know, there were people who thought that we were going to get it together and be the next big thing, because people that actually saw us when we were doing our thing were generally pretty much remembered it because it was really good. It was authentic. We meant it. You know, it was soulful. It was good. And it was out there. And we got nothing. Warner Brothers had no one to talk to. So they just kind of did it on their own. And there was just the one thing that they did was they took one of the cuts, and I think it was Going Back to Colorado, and they used to put out those sampler albums where they'd have
Yep.
for this season
Yeah.
we're releasing these things. There was I'm pretty sure it was Going Back to Colorado that they put on that, and there may have been a couple of them, but you know, there was no ad campaign. There was no articles being written. There was nobody contacting Rolling Stone. There was nobody talking to the New York Times. You know, there was just nothing.
And as you spoke in the previous chapter about how Led Zeppelin had Peter Grant,
Oh yeah.
and that he stage managed all those things that you said never happened for you guys.
That's correct.
And so you guys had management and business management that should have been impeached and convicted by the Senate
Yes, they
and
should have.
thrown out of office.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And the impact of how all of that is how it happened. I'm sorry, it was obviously devastating on psychic levels.
it was.
Within everybody, all of a sudden you guys would have had ambition individually, collectively. Okay, good. Now we can do XYZ. And then this record with Eddie and the whole thing is like, wow, this is obviously way cooler than the first one. And then,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, when I look back on it now, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, I think that the fact that that record went nowhere and we were still going out and opening shows instead of being the headliner most of the time, we never, our status in the business never changed from when we started out. In fact, it probably got worse because when we first started out, we were like there was a lot of buzz about we were the next big thing, you know. And by this time, you know, people were just like, "Oh, Zephyr, yeah, yeah." There were people. I'm not talking about the audience. I'm talking about people in the business. You know, um, we were playing shows and we were killing them, man. I mean, people still write to me on Facebook and they go, "I saw you at the blah 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 back in 1971, and you were the best band I ever saw, and I can't believe that you guys never got famous." You know, that happens fairly regularly, even now, 50 something years later. People go, "Man, you guys got screwed." You guys were really good. And we knew that. We knew that we were going out there and doing shows that were at least as good as the people we were opening for, you know, in terms of the response from the audience, in terms of, you know, what our concepts were, you know, and it never took us anywhere because we thought that, well, we're so good that everybody's just going to write about us and tell us how wonderful we are and all this kind of stuff. We didn't know that it was a machine, you know. And I think really the disappointment was that we figured it was something wrong with us. You know, I think that's why Tommy decided he was going to become a guitar hero and go on it, as he put it, go on an ego trip. You know, we were all just disappointed. You know, Candy was disappointed. You know, we were all disappointed. And I think that whatever, you know, the thing of the moment, you know, with Tommy and Bobby and breaking the band up. When I listened back to the concerts that we did in San Bernardino and at Santa Monica Civic, which were two of our last gigs together with Tommy and Bobby. We were playing great. I mean, we had it going on. You know, we knew what we were doing and it was powerful. It was tight. So it wasn't really the music. It was really the banging our heads against the wall, I think. That really did.
It's kind of like the Beatles, you know, where the business piece didn't work. It was a different dynamic, but same thing. But and I saw one of the last time I saw you guys was at the Glenn Miller Ballroom again, when you guys were doing Creator Has a Master Plan, and you don't remember this. We've talked about this, that Candy went off stage and then came back in a flowing white gown, and she had put white pancake makeup on her face.
I wish I remembered that.
And it was just like this, and the whole thing, spirituality and the whole thing about that was really starting to be a thing, and a thing in Boulder at that time.
Yeah. And she, you know, we meant it. I mean, that music was really a big influence for the next, you know, until now for me. Listening to Pharoah Sanders and Alice Coltrane and John Coltrane and all that sort of psychedelic era, new wave jazz of the early 70s. Man, that was life-changing. I still love that stuff. In fact, I still play stuff that refers to that, you know. And
so I just have a summation on all this and what a disaster. And we can go more into that in another episode. But 1969, Jimmy Page sees you guys and goes completely out of his fucking mind.
Yeah.
Billy Cobham sees you guys. And he went on to prove the most important modern drummer percussionist, and who's surpassed him since? Nobody. And Leland Sklar played with everybody under the sun.
Yep.
And to this day, he goes, I think Tommy, and obviously Zephyr was great. I don't want to just, but everybody knew. Everybody fucking knew.
Oh yeah, the musicians out in the world all knew. I mean, we were friends with the guys in Spirit. We were friends with the guys in Santana. we were friends with, people throughout the industry, like the drummer in the Grateful Dead. I mean, there were people who saw us and saw what you saw. It was a good thing. It was really something special. And, but, that wasn't our story. Our story was what happened. I look at it as, because I'm still here and I'm still working with this music and trying to make it available in a format that presents it in the best possible light.
Hurry up.
I'm going, man. This machine that we're talking on, I just bought this so that I can use the software that they make now for restoring and rehabilitating and remixing music that is baked. It used to be you couldn't pull the bass out and pull the drums out, pull the voice out, pull the guitars out, and then remix it, but that's available now, and it's available at home at my house, and I'm absolutely going to do all that. I can.
So, what I want to propose on this exciting, positive, joyful note, I mean, this is all pretty fucking sad when you ask me, but that we call it a night and that come back and we'll kind of explore the last chapter of Zephyr as a band and start taking a look behind the curtain at how important or dangerous the right management is. And you guys didn't know what you were doing. Yeah. And there was and what happened is what happened.
Yeah.
But it was a nexus of people and situations, and Colorado had nothing else going on.
Yeah.
And this to me was the beginning of a tragedy that unfolded dramatically over
quite a period of years, because Candy was part of that tragedy.
Oh, no question. No doubt.
And Robbie and John too. And my life was, had a pretty rocky spot in it because of this.
And not to blame or point fingers, but somebody wanted to be the controlling figure and maintained it and knew how to eliminate the competition and knew how to grab the power.
Oh, yeah.
And knew from how he had been raised. And there's a million stories about artists getting screwed. The record industry, the record deals back then were just shit.
Yeah.
Everybody tended to get screwed on certain levels.
Yep.
And then
they also got to cash in. We never got to the cash in part.
And somebody else got to cash in. And, not cash in, but get a lot more of the money than you guys did.
And I don't mean cash in strictly monetary terms. I'm talking about, it would have been nice to be in a position where we weren't always the underdog. Because when we were in Colorado, we could be on a par with a lot of other music that was around, particularly in the early times,
and that's what I was saying. When the anticipation for going back to Colorado was like, wow.
Yeah.
And then wow just was like,
yeah, wow died out quick. And
Rick Schmidt, again, when I talked with Rick, and his quote was, we had rock stars in our midst.
Yeah. Well, and Boulder became a music scene, and Denver became a music scene, and Barry Fay gets a lot of credit for doing that. But in my mind, I think that our band opened up a lot of doors for Colorado musicians, and it became a scene. Like Nashville's a scene, and it's Austin is a scene, and Madison is a scene, and Chicago's a scene. The reason that Boulder became a scene, the reason that people like Joe Walsh moved there and Steve Stills moved there, and what have you.
And Simzik moved and opened his record label.
Yeah, and what's his name? The guy who built
Guercio,
Jim Guercio.
Caribou.
The reason people became aware of Boulder Boulder, not Denver, but Boulder as a scene, that was started from us. That didn't come from anybody else. Everything else followed us. When we got there, the Boulder scene was the Buff Room and Tulagi. I mean, that was it. And our friends certainly contributed, to the guys who put on all those shows at the Glenn Miller Ballroom and the Folsom Field Moon Ball and all that kind of stuff. And that was, Kit Thomas and Marty Wolf and Alan Armstrong. But those were our people, that was us. And we were the band that, went out and played in the park for free and, and raised money for the battered women's shelter, and all that kind of stuff. We were part of that community. And so I'm not going, oh, well, we were so great that we deserved more. But what I'm saying is we were instrumental in taking that to a different level. We weren't Benzie Crick doing covers. Benzie Crick was a great band. George and Rusty became part of Poco and were brilliant and had great careers. But Jock Bartley and Michael Wooten, their careers went through our clutches. There was a lot that we contributed to. We were the ones that were out there proselytizing for Boulder. I mean, I wish we hadn't done it in some ways. We were going around the country going, oh, you've never been to Boulder? Oh, you should go. It's really great.
Well, I don't know if you can fully be held accountable.
No, I'm not taking credit
for what
for
happened. No, I'm
but
saying how it became so gentrified and the most expensive city along the Front
we
Range.
didn't have anything to do with that, but we set the tone that changed it from being a college party town to being there was a cultural aspect to it, that hadn't been there before. And it wasn't just us. It was, it was our people, the people that we, hung around with. They're the ones who got Allen Ginsberg and Ram Dass and those guys.
And then when Rinpoche came and started Naropa.
There you go.
And then all of a sudden Boulder became thought of as the spiritual.
Oh yeah,
the new spiritual capital of the United States.
And
in the 90s, the New Age thing.
Yeah, and Hannah, who ran the health food store.
Talk about first.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And what's his name? Oh God, Alex, red-haired Alex.
Alex Major.
Yeah, Alex Major.
North Star Studios.
He was our buddy. Me and Candy, and when we first came to Boulder, he was our bud.
When he walked in a room, everybody stopped.
Oh yeah.
He had that big camel, the coat he wore, that camel hair, long coat.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember him.
Collar that came up. Yeah.
The walk in the room, and I just remember what a presence.
Oh yeah, he was such a fun guy, man. We made friends with him the first time we met him at the Buff Room, and stayed friends. When he had the Whole Earth catalog store on Pearl Street. I still have a knife and a Joy of Cooking book that I bought from him.
Oh jeez,
it's right there. The Joy of Cooking is right behind me that I bought from Alex Major.
Wow. Rudy's Bakery, because the whole spiritual thing.
Wow. Oh yeah.
And it was just such a. And I hear what you're saying. I mean, certain cultural elements wind up having more importance than the sum of the parts.
Absolutely.
And Zephyr was, as we were just saying, I think I agree that and that's again
that role. Yeah, we had that particular part to play in that. And I remember when kids from New York started showing up and dressing like us, and all of a sudden they're wearing climbing boots and flannel shirts, and they're driving old cars, all the stuff that the Fuchs were doing and Candy and I were doing, and they were coming from New York, and of course they had a lot of money, and they did probably a more complete job of that because we were just scuffling all the time. But it was a culture. It wasn't just a Midwestern town like every other Midwestern town. There was an actual culture there, and it wasn't just us, obviously. The skiing people and the mountaineering people had their input to that whole thing, you know. I mean,
But you have to rally around something. And
You do.
And the band.
a band gets everybody together.
And
It puts a label. It's this sound what this sound represents. This tells you what it's like to be in Boulder. This is what it's like. You know, when you hear "Sail On," this is what it's like to be in Boulder in the early '70s.
And again, the whole the thing of being proud of that, caring about it, and caring about you guys. And when going back to Colorado, the song, the lead song from the album, and that was it. I'm sorry. It was just, it meant the world to those of us in Boulder who were identifying with the importance of Zephyr.
Well, you know, we played that when we got inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
I got Bobby to come and sit in with us because the first several songs that we played were all Sunset Ride songs and Michael Wooten played. But then we figured, you know, it's incumbent upon us to do Going Back to Colorado. And Bobby got up and did it. And I'll tell you what, the one we did on the night of the show was good. You know, it was nice. But the one we did the night before when we were rehearsing was killer. I mean, it was so good because Jock's a really good slide player.
Yep.
You know, and it was fun as hell. And playing with Bobby again was fun too, you know, because he still sounds just like himself. He doesn't sound like anybody else. And
he found his center and his core, 25 some years ago, where he's just
he did. And he and Betty are just a really cool, nice, warm, loving couple, you know. And Bobby's happy now, you know. I every night, you know, we kind of touch each other, you know, through Facebook. And yeah.
And I had a long talk. The phone rang the other day, and it was Johnny Bolin. And we had a long talk, and he's done such a great job of, on some levels, of keeping Tommy alive. But the Bolin family never knew anything about business.
No.
At all. And
they were worker bees entirely.
And his
dad,
I don't think
his mom even ever had a job, did she? I don't think so.
She wound up having to work.
Oh, did she?
But the point is, it's just, I don't want to dwell on the tragic part, but the whole thing's tragic in many ways.
Tragedy is a good thing in some ways. You know, I've often thought that John Lennon has grown far more in stature being dead than he would have had he stuck around like Paul did and just sort of, you know, it's tragedy's okay if you believe in an afterlife.
There you go. But, you know, and things happen, and they all happen, and that's it. And that's just the way it is. So
it is.
But for those of us who were there then, and I've had a chance here today to express, you know, what it meant, not just to me, but to Boulder. Those of us who were contemporaries of you guys from the same generation. And there was a romance to that. And the flame of that romance was the group Zephyr.
That's cool. That's a good way to wrap this thing up.
Yes, it is. So thank you, David. This has just been incredible today. 2 more episodes, and we have at least one more to do, which would be more about the end of the first incarnation of Zephyr. We can also talk about other incarnations, but also more of a forensic look at behind the curtain of
we can do that.
Of what happened, because you know more about that than you were there.
I was the guy.
And so, and just to be blunt, Barry, there was a cult of romance about Barry that's fueled by the fact that he brought every great rock band imaginable into Colorado.
Yes, he did.
And he made sure he was the only one doing that.
Oh, yeah.
And the romance
still limping because they tried to interfere with that.
And people projected their own love of music from an era that was just so emotional for so many people projected that he was the hero.
And Barry loved that role. You know, when he was, and I'll just say this one thing, and that is when we were first with him, his disclaimer was, "I know nothing about music. It's not what I know. What I know is how to do something good with the money that you make." I mean, he said that straight up. I don't know anything about music. I do this, for you, for the kids, for you kids. He says, but I don't know anything about music. And then later on, he became the godfather of rock, and he was like a music critic. He's like, "Oh, these guys are good, and these guys are not good, and blah blah blah." And it's just like,
and then in his autobiography, he then at the end in the back, top 10 singers of all time, top 10 guitar players, top 10 bass players, and Tommy's I think either 10th or 11th on the guitar player list. Which
nice, Barry.
We can make I can make the argument that he was number one, if not 1, 2, or 3. And who was his manager? And he puts him at that point on the list.
Oh, yeah,
and you guys, otherwise, you're not. Nobody else is on there. But he's anyway. We're gonna.
I know. The fact that Candy saved his ass at the Denver Pop Festival, and he had the nerve to shit on her for the rest of her life, just astonishes me.
Well, the deep dive I've done is that he suffered as deep a trauma as a kid as anybody. He's tied for first, and that colored his entire life.
Yeah, that's true.
So you can make a story to feel sorry for him, but anyway, I think we should.
Well, it turns into some kind of Shakespeare thing, where it's like there's so many levels of reason and motivation and all that stuff. But the bottom line, as far as I'm concerned, is this is what happened. This was the result. This is where it led. And this is what happened to these really nice, talented people because he was an asshole. Now, I didn't know his mom very well. I met her. I didn't know his dad at all.
He had died I'm not blaming them. Long before then.
Yeah. And so, it is what it is. I'm still here, and I'm going to do my best to make sure that what music remains gets available to people, and it'll be in the best possible light, and that's my job now. And I don't mind that.
And you guys had such a huge impact on me that I've never let go.
You haven't, and thank goodness you haven't.
And it's still, my life has moved on. I've it's not, but there's a thread. I'm still have that attachment.
Yeah, and
because of that time.
Yeah, and I'm
waiting for Going Back to Colorado to come out. I'm sorry. That was huge.
Yeah,
and then
I wish we would have come through for
here's
you.
The balloon, and here's the poof, and the whole thing just.
Yeah, it popped.
So, David, thank you again. My sincerest sense of gratitude that we can do this. I think
back at you, Mike.
People need to, if they care at all about any of this, this is what they need to be checking out. So we'll be getting it up on Facebook, and then we'll be back soon to try to tie a yellow ribbon on the whole thing, and it may turn black, but
it's a story, and it's actually kind of a good story, and I'd like it to be told. If the fact that it's a tragedy, well, it's not a tragedy for them. They're all dead. Their tragedy is over, and Barry's gone, and now what remains is the thing that they left as a mark. And Tommy had his own, and Candy and I had our own. But that time that we spent together was a powerful, it was a great ride, it really was.
And one of my nerves about Tommy is that he evolved into being a great producer. And today we established the first track he ever produced.
Yeah.
Which, and that's my hypothesis, that every time he did a record, that was a brick in the wall that led him tour when he did
Well, you know,
Private
Ian
Eyes.
Pace. Ian Pace made a comment to a friend of mine, and he said that Tommy used to, you know, he sort of. There were times when the two of them were talking, and he said Tommy was almost like wistful, reminiscing about those times, the Zephyr times. He said he really, you know, it was the halcyon days, you know, those were the days when he was learning the ropes, and we were getting out in the world, and everything was open, and the whole future was, you know, looked great.
And the
Looked
one
great. It
thing
was
that
a
happened
happy
for
time.
Tommy is he got
Yeah.
more engaged with Barry as time went on.
Well,
And
that's
that
not
would
wasn't
have
very
fed
bad.
that sense of wistfulness,
Yeah.
because Barry wasn't really a spiritual presence.
No. Nope. But there are all sorts of good lessons in this story. You know, there were a lot of bad decisions that had consequences, and there were a lot of wonderful decisions that also had consequences. And I have that music in my basement, and some of it is absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's just absolutely stunning.
And I think the software you're talking about is the same software that Giles Martin just used to redo Revolver, where he could take where there's three instruments on one track and he could pull them out and put them on separate. And I think that's what you're using.
Yeah, I think so. I'm using something called Isotope RX10.
Well, I'm going to
And it's the
Google it again and see.
newest version of that. And I don't have, there are two versions of it that are more expensive than the one I bought.
And that's probably they're probably using the more expensive one.
They're using the really good stuff, you know.
But anyway, it's good news for all the fans.
Yeah.
And
oh yeah, there's going to be you know, if I, you know, continue to play tennis 3 times a week and, you know, keep my act together, I should last long enough to get through all of this stuff before I depart, you know, and I would really like to do that.
Well, in our next chapter, we can also try to get a sense from you as to what your plans are for what can come from all that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, David Givens, thank you again. I think it's time to say good night.
Thanks, Mike.
And
Good
thank
night.
you, man. Appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Same here.